Hi guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Kevin Moore Show. Now on today's show, I'm about to be joined by my guest, Stephanie James. Now Stephanie is a psychotherapist and a licensed clinical social worker with over 30 years in the mental health field. Now since 2007, Stephanie has been the creative leader and host of the Spark Summit, which is a gathering of today's thought leaders in the areas of psychology, spirituality, and science. Now, it's designed to help people break through limiting beliefs and behaviors and live their best lives. Now, she's also the host of the motivational radio show and podcast, The Spark, and is listened to in over 48 different countries. Stephanie James, welcome to the show.
It's so wonderful to be here with you, Kevin. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, well, I came across your work and I was like, this is interesting, what you're doing. And there's such a sort of massive story to this that we're no way going to be able to cover it just in this interview. But I think to begin with, let's just go, to where you are right now. So right now you've done a documentary, and how long ago was the documentary made and released?
Well, it hasn't been released yet. We literally are just at the end of post-production right now. Literally this week is sound engineering will be complete, and the color editing will be complete, the color correction. And so it's going to be ready for distribution, but it's been about a year and a half in the making.
If you were to sum up what you do right now and the direction of your purpose, how would you sum that up?
Well, I would say the first thing that, my purpose has been very clear to me throughout my life and was really, I was able to define it. It was about 15 years ago as, my true purpose is to bring as much love and healing to the world as possible. And I've been able to do that for the last 30 years in different capacities. I've been in personal growth and wellness in the mental health field for 30 years, the last 14 years as a psychotherapist. And it's just been such an exciting, I always say like turning 50 has been like the most amazing thing. The last 3 years is when, my book, I wrote my book, started the podcast and radio show, The Spark with Stephanie James. And through that, I have met just so many amazing people who are now my dear friends, people who are thought leaders and really change makers in our world. And those are actually several of the people who came. There were 12 of us all together who came together a year ago, October, here in Fort Collins for a really special event where the presenters came and we did a summit, but they came 2 days ahead of time and spent that time doing our own processes. We did one day where we did interviews and then met around this big, huge table, this round table. We called it Lights of the Round Table. And these amazing people who usually would be flown in and they'd give their speech or presentation and then leave, had this amazing experience ahead of time where we sang together and made music together. We had meals. We had these amazing deep discussions. We meditated together. And that alchemy that was created there was then taken to the stage the next day for the summit. And all of the presenters stayed in the audience. They were a part of the audience. So it was like this really cool unified field where we're all the same height. And that, as we ignite the sparks within ourselves, we can help to ignite those in one another. So it was just really beautiful. So I've been so busy full time with my private practice. I've been co-authoring another book this last year with Misa Hopkins, doing all the post-production. I am co-producing the film with Doug Beechwood. And it has literally been the busiest but most wonderful time of my life.
I can only imagine. But because you're living in your purpose, I guess it just feels so like a lot of fun, most of it. Most of it you're probably so drawn to do, it doesn't feel like work.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are times that I'm, working with Doug, and we are editing things. We're on this big soundboard, or we can see one of the frames of the cameras. There was three different cameras, and we're going through all the different camera angles. And as I'm in this editing process, there's times I just have to stop and go, "Oh my gosh!" I cannot believe this is my life. I'm this little girl from Fort Collins, Colorado, and yet, I mean, so it's like really living so many of my dreams. It's really been so beautiful.
That is beautiful to be able to sort of share that with people as well, because it's only inspiring. Do you know what I mean? So,
Mm.
all right, let's go into just a bit of the past here as well. So, and tell me if I'm wrong here, but I mean, obviously, you're embracing the sort of psychology, the science, the spirituality in the work that you do now. But were there all those three sort of modalities there prior to, if we went back in the time machine and went, looked at your career previously, are you now embracing that more as you've gone on this journey?
Oh, absolutely. And like any of us, none of us get out of life unscathed. I mean, a lot of this came out of my own wounding through my childhood and things that had happened. And honestly, my first year of college, I went to art school in LA. I wanted to be either a fashion designer or fashion merchandiser or do interior design. And it wasn't through just a series of literal serendipity. I had actually gotten into the art school in London the next year. And this is 1986, just to date myself. And that was when the American embassy was bombed in London. And so, yeah, my parents pulled me out, and I ended up working for most of that year. And then met with Larry Bloom, who is one of my dearest friends and has been such an amazing mentor in my life. And he was the director and professor of the psychology department over at CSU here. And in a meeting with him where I was like, I got to figure out what I want to do. We were just he'd known me since I was 13 years old, and he said, you are such a natural at this. This is your calling. And said, I know the advisor, go talk to her. And literally the rest was history. And that's kind of how I got onto this career path.
Okay, that's thank you. So you mentioned there about childhood, and I believe it was an affair that your father had at the time, and you've talked about this openly before, I'm sure, right? Um,
Yeah.
so at the time when that was all going on, I mean, people may say yes, that's traumatic, but others can go through much more traumatic things as well, right? Pain is still pain relative to whoever it is, pain it is, right? But that that had issues in your life, didn't it, leading up to your career, I believe. And would you say that when you were giving your first few sessions, taking the pain from so many people in those first few sessions and taking it home as well, that you were also healing yourself in a sense?
Totally, to be totally honest, I had already done so much of my own work by the time I showed up in the therapy chair. And I do think, everyone goes through tremendous challenges, and we can't compare ours to each other. I think everyone goes through different things. In my particular situation, um, I talk about this in one of my presentations that I give, because literally the way that things exploded was, I mean, I truly had probably the most idyllic 13 years of childhood I could imagine, just surrounded by loving family. Uh, my mother was a businesswoman here in town. My father was a professor at CSU. Tons of parties growing up, tons of just special birthdays. And I was totally a daddy's girl. So I was my dad's constant shadow. I'd go with him to his office, or whether he was raking leaves or taking a nap, I always wanted to be right there by his side. And it was literally in the middle of the night, my brother and I, my brother's 3 years younger than I was. And at 13 years old, and he was 10, we were woken up to the sound of screeching tires going down the driveway. And we look out of the second story window of my bedroom, and we see my mom just tearing down the driveway. My dad jump on the hood of the car, and he's beating on the windshield for her to get out. And it was then, unbeknownst to us, that my dad was having an affair with my best friend's mother and had told my mother at that point. And it was like this perfect childhood. really loving. It wasn't perfect, that's too strong of a word, but very loving, nurturing, amazing, happy family on all aspects, looking family. It was, completely shattered and irreversibly broken from that point on. And so things were really difficult. And I think the fact that, my mother being in a relationship for 18 years with my father, she adored him. She's an amazing woman. And I always have to say that my mom is one of the strongest people I know. And I just love her and adore her so much for her strength. But at the time, she was completely shattered. So she became very emotionally unstable. And I didn't feel safe staying with her. So I left to go with my father, who, of course, I was so close to. That was very natural. But very soon I had a stepmother who made it very clear that I was not a wanted part of the equation, right? And so the message was, I consider you the other woman. The way that you and your dad love each other isn't healthy. And, that shatter from going from being, my father was, I had my dad on the biggest pedestal, right? He was the closest person in my world to, from that point on, never being allowed to speak with him alone. I was never allowed to spend time with him alone. And to this day, I have never been allowed to speak with him alone on the phone. And so, my life really changed. And at 16, when I went to go live with my mother, he didn't speak to me for a year. And then later at 22 for 3 years. So I had these times where the way I interpreted it to myself was, I'm not lovable. There must be something wrong with me if my own father has rejected me. And so those wounds were really deep, Kevin. I mean, those were things that at 19 years old, I was getting my butt into therapy.
Yeah, and it still carries on to now, as you say. You still don't have that relationship, and you've had to make peace with that wound. It's a continuous wound, and I mention that because obviously, life, healing is. You've said before, probably, it's continuous in a sense. The relationships are one of the biggest things to learn from, no matter what type of relationship it is. It's like we come down here to learn the opposite of what love is sometimes. Do you know what I mean? And to you know but there's so much to your story in the sense that, okay, so you went through you did your own healing, or you went to counseling probably. Do you think you were
Yeah.
suffering from post-traumatic stress at the time?
Well, at the time, I don't think I would have called it post-traumatic stress. I mean, I had some post-traumatic stress in a very serious car accident I was in at 19, in a rollover accident. But I think, at 19 seems like that was kind of a pinnacle year. Not only was I doing therapy, but I also, my spiritual life really started to open up. And I started learning about other ways of thinking and being in the world. I was learning about transfiguration from Leonard Orr and rebirthing from Sandra Ray and, things that most 19-year-olds don't really get to experience. So I feel blessed in that. But yeah, I guess I want to speak to, the point in which you were saying, yeah, this became such a huge theme in my life. And I think my biggest work has been learning how to love myself. Like, truly, we hear that all the time. It sounds so cliche, but it really was, because it's like I didn't have that outer love mirrored to me anymore. I didn't have the person that had always been my champion and cheerleader and best friend telling me that I was worthy. And let me tell you, there was like 10 years there where I didn't believe it was true. I was, at 16 years old, felt very suicidal for a while, and my dad wouldn't speak to me. So I definitely, I was at those points of I've got to figure this out for myself. And so the inner journey, and it continues today. But the beautiful thing is I can say there truly is hope for all of us, because, I went from really being self-loathing for about 10 years to truly developing this relationship where I was able to cultivate a friendship first, truly, where I realized that I could show up for myself, that I could rely on me to have my own back, to be there for myself, and then cultivate this sense of love by the consistency in which I did that. So the mornings, I woke up and sat on the mat and did my meditations and then did my workout and exercise and did my journaling. I talk a lot to people about being the priority in your own life and that actually being one of the greatest gifts we can give to other people. Because we've all heard that thing like put on your own oxygen mask first. And this is really about doing just that. It's like when we start cultivating that relationship with us, we have so much more love, resiliency, reserve to give.
Right, absolutely. That's not saying that you're just going to live a selfish life all the throughout your existence, because that's one thing you're not doing. Because through the work that you're doing, you're obviously helping many people on their journey. Yeah, absolutely. What was the one thing that helped you with self love? What was that defining thing that made you realize that I can self love?
I think there were definite times of breakthrough in that. It goes all the way back to, again, being 19 years old. I remember, of all things, reading Leo Buscaglia. Do you remember him? He was an author. He might be before your time. But Leo Buscaglia wrote a book on love. And I think that was one of the things that just got me thinking in a different way and starting to realize that, really what I could love about myself, and this has been a lesson throughout my life, um, is realizing that love that each of us are, that's truly our essence. So it doesn't matter the choices we've made, it doesn't matter the circumstances in our life. There's something that is unchangeable within us. It's that spark that was me still at 3 and 4 years old, right? That just loved all of life and loved nature and animals and every human being I feel like I came into contact with. I was such a little love bug. And and I share in my book too about an experience with a really close family member who, and this lesson continued, right? And learning this love lesson, I think, continues our whole life. But about 15 years ago, a really close family member had three very serious suicide attempts after coming back from Iraq, and over the course of a year and a half. And, during each of those times, I'd spend like a week with him. He'd be in ICU and only alive on, a ventilator or things that were, pumping his heart for him. And when he came out of that, he was so heavily medicated for so many years that I thought this person that I adored and loved, the personality of him was lost. It was gone because he was so medicated. There were times where he would literally even just start drooling. Um, and so I had this awareness, oh my God, I've been in love with his personality. I've been in love with how funny he is. And, he's, a golden child and he's, spiritual and is charismatic. And the truth was, I just loved him for his essence. I really got to that point of seeing into him. It didn't matter what the external was. It didn't matter how well or not that he could communicate. I could just feel that loving heart that was in there that I'd known my whole life. So I feel like that helped me to see that also more deeply within myself. That we're so much more than what's going on in our external circumstances. There's this amazing essence of who we are, and that's what I call the spark of who we are. And that's who we are at our core. Nothing takes that away. And we have to just remind ourselves we can excavate that if we need to and get back to that essential piece in us.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like you're talking about, maybe I might term it the soul, like the true
Yeah.
essence of who we are. Or I mean, it's difficult to put it into words, but the isness of that true part of us, which is within all of us, no matter how much of a shitty person we may appear to be, right? you know, yeah, and it's very difficult. We judge people, don't we? We judge people a lot in the sense that, just because they're a certain way, we don't know what they've gone through. Which I'm sure you see again and again and again with the clients coming through. You can't judge. You don't judge properly, and that's probably been part of your work. But I mean, obviously, you deal with a lot of people um, whether, I guess I was going to say in person, but I stopped myself there. Right now, it's probably not so much in person. I mean, do you do this over video link now? Is that sort of the way?
Yeah,
Yes, yes. And
yeah,
and and
over Zoom.
and people can get those sessions through you, can they?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Okay. Yeah. And I'll put your website is.
My website is www.stephaniejames.world. And, I've really moved, Kevin, into transformational life coaching to really take people beyond the wounds to the next phase, which is so exciting. It's like going beyond just surviving our circumstances to thriving. And so that has just been this whole new exciting place in my work that I'm absolutely loving.
Well, I know I said at the beginning of this interview, there's so much to your work. I know we're just not going to be able to cover it all. But what I was going to say there as well is, yeah, you deal with trauma, well, all sorts of issues within a client's or a couple's session, and how do you not take that home with you?
Yeah, that's such a great question because I get asked that honestly all the time. Um, because as a trauma specialist, I do work with a lot of heavy duty cases. And I could honestly say in the last 14 years, I've probably come home maybe a handful of times where something that was discussed during one of those sessions just hit me to the core, and I would come home and just bawl my eyes out. And I think when that happened, though, mainly that was because I had known that person, or maybe they'd been in therapy for quite a while, and then something super traumatic got revealed. And I knew them so well that it just, hit my heart in a certain way. When someone comes in with a brand new trauma that I haven't heard before, it doesn't hit me in the same way. I mean, of course, it's awful and it's devastating. I feel compassion and empathy, but there's something different when you've worked with someone for 9 months or a year and that relationship is so deep. Oftentimes you know people better than they know their family or even some of their loved ones. So it's such an honor to be walking this journey. But I would say, for the most part, I don't take it home. I think that's one of the blessings, if you will, of all the different pain I have gone through in my life is that when someone walks into my office, I feel like I can hold whatever they're feeling. There's some sense of reference within me, but I don't have to take it on. I feel like part of my work as a therapist and as a healer has literally been around continually doing my own work in whatever capacity that is, whether it's, spiritual retreats, whether it's different modes of therapy or yoga or meditation. Those are things I want to keep doing because I want to be as clear of a conduit as possible for my clients and the people that I work with. So it's actually it feels like it's such a beautiful experience to be able to hold someone's pain and yet not take it on, and it allows them then to more fully experience and process and heal through what they need to. I'm not adding to that heaviness or that collective pain. And so the way I deal with it is in healthy ways. I come home, I've got an amazing family, I've got an absolutely wonderful relationship. My boyfriend and I think we probably talk 20 times a day, it seems like. Um, but also, I'm really close with my kids. I've got an awesome soul tribe, and I work out and I meditate and I journal and I do things that really give me a sense of resilience.
Yes, absolutely. And with what you're doing, I find that most people in your work have gone through their own issues, big issues. And I don't know anyone that's probably, well, not people I've met that's in the psychology world that haven't gone through major things to get them into this type of work, right? And maybe to even make them ready for it as well. So there are no mistakes, just experiences, right?
Yes. Yeah.
But a lot of your
Absolutely.
clients can't see that in the time of the pain, though.
I think, for any of us, we tend to feel like we have blinders on when we're in that pain. And we can only see our own experience, at times. And but what I found in doing this for so many years is that people really are able, as they come into different areas of healing, they're able to extract, whatever the lesson was or whatever the gift actually is in that. And I think, that's one of the important parts, of my film, the film that I have. And, we're looking at distribution now with Amazon Prime or Gaia or Netflix. And the film really is, it's called When Sparks Ignite, and that's what it's really truly about, is about how every one of the people that is on, that is the cast, they've all gone through amazing challenges and hardships in their life. And they're the people that are, New York Times bestselling authors and international presenters and, thought leaders around the world. And I think to the outside people, they look like, oh my gosh, they must have just been born evolved. And yet we know what a myth that is, right? We all, no matter who you are or what profession, what socioeconomic status you've had, we've all experienced pain. We've all had these life challenges. And so, the premise becomes of the film is how, as we go through these painful moments, that these become then the match point that ignites something within us. And that can actually become our gift that then we give to humanity. And so that's been my life work, and hopefully what I am doing to give back to all the amazing people in my life, that have been there for me, all the amazing teachers and friends and family, and just wanting to put that love and healing back into the world.
And sometimes, we can get stuck on certain medications sometimes, can't we? That stops the healing process or doesn't allow us to want to see some of our own issues. Do you know what I mean?
As far as like non-prescription drugs or prescription drugs
Both,
or
both.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think we can do it through so many things. I think we're in a society of distraction. I think that it can be the internet, it can be any kind of social media. Anything that actually could actually be good in small quantities can become this distracting force and potentially negative for us. Whether it's, shopping or sex or gambling. I mean, any of these things can become
It's in
more
balance.
addictive.
It's keeping it in
Yeah.
balance. Yeah.
Totally, totally. And so it's as we bring our lives into balance, then we are able to find, the gifts. We are able to do that healing. But we avoid it. Some of us avoid it, like crazy and we don't even realize sometimes I think that we're doing it.
Well, we may try to avoid it, but it's times like this where there's a pandemic that's gone on for so long right now, and it's been so destructive in so many levels, right? And of course, other things like presidential elections, right? Where these times have really triggered any issues that we've had. I've a lot of people I've spoken to have come up, and it may be nothing connected with what's going on, but they've come up.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's been really interesting in that it's felt like this whole universal lesson that nobody can get away from. It's like when there's been big disasters in another country, we can say, oh, we feel sorry for them and we, send them aid, but it doesn't really impact us. It doesn't really change our lives. And here we are in this global pandemic where we're all in the same boat, like we're all experiencing the same things of loss and fear and, the unknown. And so it's really pushed people, a lot of people to the end of their being at times. And it's also, I think, created, even though, yes, there's been extreme pain and some really difficult losses and hardships, it's also caused this opposite effect that's been really beautiful that I've experienced within a lot of people where they've had to go within for the first time. They've been in a situation where, there's not a lot of choice. And so it's like we can either sit with ourselves and have it be the most negative, horrific experience, or we can say, how can I utilize this opportunity to grow? How can I find something in this? And we get to know ourselves in a really different way, in a deeper way. And so, definitely, I think this has, for some people, been some of the most spiritual or awakening time where they're finding deeper gifts and they're really finding the things that really do ignite them from within. And they don't have the outside world to feed them anymore. So it's like, how do I find those inner resources within me? And so it's just been amazing in that. I've seen just amazing gifts and creativity come through people during this time.
Do you think that comes down to some of the healing, or a big part of the healing in what you've everything you've said so far as well, is when people just come into present moment and realize that in this moment, absolutely, even though it may be traumatic, in this actual moment, as I speak these words or you think those words, it's okay. It may not be if you project into the future or go back into the past, but right now, it's okay.
Yeah. Yes, I love that. It's one of the things, Kevin, I say to my clients all the time. It's when we are focused in the present moment, it's like we really do come to that natural place where there is more calm. What we do is we create, the thing is when we're worried about what's going to happen tomorrow or even later this afternoon, our mind holds up that image of, oh my gosh, the worst is going to happen, and we experience it as happening now. The same thing if we're ruminating about the past or we're feeling, remorse or regret about the past. It's not happening now, but again, our mind experiences it as now, so we start feeling emotionally depressed. And the beautiful thing is we can use this present moment to cultivate more of what we really want in our lives. We know that it's a principle of physics that what we focus on expands. So we can choose to focus in this present moment, that the point of power is in the present moment. So focusing on what does bring me joy. If I'm going to think about something, an old memory, I can think about something that brought me such happiness as a child. Oftentimes, I go back myself to my parents had this ranch up in the western slope of Colorado, and just being there, and I bring myself back where I'm smelling the pines or smelling, I can smell the sage and hear the leaves rattling, and all of a sudden you are filled with a sense of peace. And the reality is, most of the time in this exact moment, if I just stay here, not even going back to a positive past moment, things are okay. I can focus on taking this breath. I can be with this moment and know, yes, exactly what you said. I am all right in this moment. And if I want to create an even better moment, I can do some of these things that can really resource me and really increase that sense of well-being even
Yeah.
more fully.
Well, there's nothing more when, maybe you're you're ill, for example, you've got some major issue and you're watching this right now and maybe it's a loss of sight, it's a loss whatever it may be, right? I'm sure there's something good in that present moment. It may not feel like it because you feel like you've lost something major in your life that you took for granted, right? But I'm sure even if you've got a carer there or you've got supporting family or whatever it may be, there's always something positive to grab onto. But we've also got to be willing to flow with life, haven't we? That it's taken us in a direction that we never expected, and it may only have its best interest right now, but if you looked at it from a bigger perspective or from afar, it may not look like it. But actually, it's that trust to know that it's going to be okay. But it may be so many disruptive things going on at the time that it's difficult to get in that space.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And and Kevin, you bring to point something, or bring to mind a point that I think is really important. And I think that one of the things that's essential is this is not about living a life through rose-colored glasses. It's not like we need to be happy all the time and everything's got to be just positive and awesome. I think part of the power too in the present moment can be acknowledging, like when you were saying, if we had lost our sight or if we're in pain, acknowledging, yeah, I'm in that place in this moment. Yeah, absolutely. It's oftentimes when we're resisting emotions, there's that new mnemonic device of what we resist persists. So if we're resisting the pain too, we're actually amplifying it. So I think there's beautiful techniques that we have where we can actually acknowledge, yeah, right now, if I was in pain or let's say that I was stressed, I could say, my throat's tight, my chest is tight right now. I'm aware that I'm, feeling upset about this thing. And the thing is, again, with power in the present moment, we don't have to stay there. We can acknowledge it, we can allow it, and then we can say, okay, I'm just going to breathe into this place. And there's a beautiful breath technique that I've just actually been learning and working with some beautiful individuals actually online who it's a breathing technique where you breathe into that pain and then you absolutely drop it. It's like as if you were holding the pain like I'm holding my fist, and you just breathed into it and then completely let it go. And it's amazing how some of these very, very simplistic techniques can help us transcend some of the pain.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. If you were to name any one technique that comes to mind, what would that be? Just breathing?
Breathing to me is always the first. I mean, I'm always blown away by the power of our breath. If you know Wim Hof, the Iceman, he's someone that goes into, yeah, these freezing waters and can control his physiology through breath. And, one of the techniques, I actually got to see him. I was at a Tony Robbins event 3 years ago, and he was one of the presenters. And so I got to practice one of his techniques where you take these 40 deep breaths in rapid succession. And what was amazing is I was able to utilize it not long after that, flying out of Newark into a thunderstorm, and the plane was pitching back and forth. And I could tell my brain was starting to just tick. And the adrenaline and the cortisol started releasing. I could tell I was getting anxious. And I remembered at that moment um, that I could do this breathing technique. And I have to tell you too, one of the funny moments of that time was the gentleman sitting beside me was actually an what is MMA fighter, and he had just gotten back from a fight in Egypt. And while we were on the ground for 35 minutes before we were even allowed to take off because the weather was so bad. He was showing me pictures of his fight and how awful his eye had been bloodied and all this stuff. And so it was so funny at that moment, right before I realized I could take a breath, I was gripping the seat in front of me because we were literally pitching side to side, not just up and down. And I looked over, and that gentleman was also grabbing his seat in the exact same fashion. And we both started laughing. And that kind of broke the trance for a moment. And that's what reminded me then I'm going to do those breaths. And I was amazed at the end of 40 breaths. I was totally calmed down. The plane was still pitching, but my brain was no longer sensing that I was in danger. So I think it really does. I think it begins with doing a little of the inner journey, if you will. I love Tara Brach's acronym RAIN. She's a beautiful Buddhist teacher, but you don't have to be Buddhist to get this technique. She talks about the R in RAIN is to recognize, and you recognize what's going on. Like a lot of us will go through the day and our shoulders are so tight, or our chests are so tight, and we're just used to it. We've acclimated to such high levels of stress, we don't even know we're feeling it. So it's recognizing, okay, this is going on right now. And then the A of RAIN is really big. That's allow. Instead of saying, I'm not going to feel this right now, I don't want to feel it, we breathe into it. And that's where that breath work comes in. You just breathe into wherever the pain is. And just by breathing into it, by just being with it for that moment, it actually starts to move. It's just energy, right? Our emotions are just energy. So we allow them to move as we breathe into them. And the I is to investigate. We can investigate and say, what is this connected to? Is there some work I need to do around this? Am I just holding this tension from the drive into work this morning? And then the N is returning to natural presence. And that's as we, really ground ourselves and center ourselves in this present moment and return to a sense of well-being, that our natural presence, our natural state is well-being. When we're not worrying, when we're not letting this, frantic mind take over and make meaning of all these different things, we can really rest in this moment. And that is where we can find peace.
Yes, absolutely. And I think one thing these times have done for a lot of us is to put us into our purpose, or to at least knock on the door and say, "Hey, are you doing what you're supposed to be doing? You even may have a sort of full-time job, but are you actually doing the other thing that part of your soul is earning you, pushing you, pulling you to wanna do?" So, would you say that purpose is a big thing as well?
Absolutely. I think that our purpose, though, doesn't have to be grand. I think that's sometimes where we can get lost in, because we hear so much about like the purpose-driven life, and, we have to find our purpose to be happy. I don't think we have to find our purpose to be happy, I do think though that having a purpose gives us a sense of well-being. If that makes sense, that distinction. So that as we have a purpose, what that does, it gives us a reason to wake up in the morning. I mean, your purpose might be to be the best dog walker in the world or the best dog walker in your neighborhood, but it's a reason you get up in the morning and you put your best self into that situation. If you love dogs like crazy and that's something that fills you and you're giving love to those animals, I mean, that is an incredible purpose. It's not a purpose compared to anyone else's,
No, we do.
right?
Yeah, right. We do compare. Yeah, it's not. No.
It's not. And I know, in high school, one of my purposes is I used to go to the local nursing home and read to some of the residents that were blind and could no longer read for themselves. And that was amazingly fulfilling. Those are the little things that our purpose doesn't have to be our forever purpose. I think that's maybe an important point as well. We can keep cultivating deeper purpose in our life. And there are beautiful times when we hit that, like when I hit that um just small sentence, I was able to really carve it down and say, yep, that's it. My purpose is to put as much love and healing into the world as possible. And what's beautiful is I get to do that through all these different capacities, so that becomes the gift. So I do think, there's really, cool exercises out there that we can utilize to help us define that for ourselves. But I would say to people, really think about number one, as a child, what were the things that were easy to you? What were the things that came easy that people said, oh, you're so good at that, just naturally? Or the things that you did that you felt in flow when you were doing them, like you just lost track of time. Oftentimes those are gifts that we've forgotten because we got so busy with being a human doing instead of a human being, right? And so it's coming back to some of those things that really lit us up inside. And when we're able to find those threads again, it's like, yeah, I mean, I love speaking. I used to love speech class. I used to interview my brother as little kids. I was probably, 6 years old and he was probably 3, and I would interview him in the bathtub with a hairbrush. And, that was a passion for me. I always loved doing things like that. I was always putting on plays and,
Well,
um,
well,
you
let's
know,
let's just remind people as well. You do have a podcast, so if you go to your website,
yeah,
you be and that is, there's nothing wasted, is there? I mean, yeah, there's nothing wasted. I've learned that the hard way. That whatever we've done in the past eventually has some substance where we are in the present moment, which is kind of weird how
yeah.
that works.
But it's so true. I mean, if we looked back over the map of our lives, I think you can start seeing that trail, right? Those little breadcrumbs, if you will, that were dropped along the way that then become something really important for us later in our lives. And definitely, when I was walking into the studio for my very first interview on the radio station, I remember it just came into my mind. I mean, I was really nervous walking in, and then it just came to my mind like, Stephanie, you were born this way, and I really literally remembered that time with my brother in the bathtub, and I was like, that's it, and one of my songs that really pumps me up is Lady Gaga's, Baby You Were Born This Way, because it reminds me of that, and I don't have to be like anybody else. And so, it's going to be 3 years in February that the Spark with Stephanie James was
Congrats.
born. And thank you. Thank you. It's been one of the most tremendous gifts again in my life. I've absolutely loved it. I love my guests. I love sharing that wisdom. And so yeah, and so people can listen. It's right now it's streamed live on loudspeaker.fm. So you can just Google that from your phone or your computer, and you can listen live. Actually, right after this, I'm going to be doing an awesome live broadcast with, I know this will go out later, but it's so fun to be plugged into that live energy. And then the next day, it's released as a podcast. It's dropped as a podcast on the sparkpod.com or any of, it's on Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever people get their
We'll link that down below.
podcasts.
Don't worry. That's all linked in the description below as well. And the reason I mention purpose is because well, I feel it's connected to that when, part of healing is actually living your purpose and trying to see, where you're at is absolutely perfect, and that, if there's something that you're pulled to do, that may be your purpose, and it can change as well. That's okay. Change is a thing that none of us have control of. I think it's part of life to have change a lot, but being in purpose, yeah, it's an important part.
Yeah,
But and as
absolutely.
you said, it could just be being a mum or a dad or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember this time, and I'm not a practicing religious person, but this woman, I just, and I have deep reverence for people that are, this, and I'm a very spiritual person, so I don't want to confuse that. Um, this woman that I used to work with at a mental health center, she was just this beautiful, devout Catholic. And I remember just admiring her faith and her passion for that so much. And I said, gosh, sometimes I wish, maybe I should have been a nun. Maybe I should have, because I feel so devoted myself to spirit, and wanting to live my life in a spirit-filled way. And I loved her feedback. She said, well, that wasn't the plan for you. You weren't supposed to live in a nunnery. You weren't supposed to live, as a monk. You were supposed to, have children and, a family and this, big life that you've created. That was the plan for you. So none of our purposes, right, are going to be the same as anyone else's. And so not to get, we see celebrities or sports heroes and like, oh, that's just this ultimate life. And you know what? We have the ultimate life. We have the ultimate life if we'll allow ourselves to have it, because we've been given this gift of life. And it's really finding out what the gems of that are for us.
Absolutely. And I'm going to quote something you may have said as well. We are already what we want to be.
Mm. That was not my quote, but I love that
Okay,
quote.
I thought you might have done. I said, yeah,
Yeah,
but okay, yeah. Is it? Yeah, well, yeah, and joy is a big part of that. L- joy has to be a part of that, doesn't it?
absolutely. Kevin, I laugh to myself sometimes, and I know some of it leaks out in sessions, of course. But I am such a kid at heart, and I love that the more I've grown up, the more I've realized I can access that part of me. And I think play and joy are just essential parts. I mean, that is part of our essence. Joy is part of our essence of who we are. And so to allow yourself, right now, even when we're shut in our own homes, put on your favorite music, dance in the kitchen, let yourself paint and create and tap into flow. And it doesn't take much to tap into that sense of joy, whether it's literally remembering a joyful memory, like we talked about earlier, that can help pull up that emotion. But it can also be, a daily way to access joy is writing down the things that you are truly grateful for in that moment, in that day, and then just putting a hand on your heart and feeling into that, letting yourself just marinate on that for a few moments. And that truly enhances the feelings of joy. And so I just encourage people all the time. I mean, we need to be playing daily. I mean, I don't care if it's a board game with your kids, I don't care if it's allowing yourself to just scribble, or maybe, if it's, playing tic-tac-toe with your neighbor. It's something that's allowing you to get out of your head and into that beautiful creative flow that just this inner joy just springs from.
Yes, and the future can look bright. I mean, yes, the present moment may be difficult right now, but acceptance of it is a great place to come from, and you can manifest the life that you so want. You've just got to know. You've just got to really be true to yourself of what it really is, without any comparison, and not really caring what others think.
Yes. Yeah. And the beautiful thing is, as we do that, as we allow ourselves to fall in love with ourselves, as we allow ourselves to heal, as we allow ourselves to ignite our joy, then we allow others to do the same. By our modeling that, then that becomes the gift we give to all of humanity. And so that's the hope for our world.
Absolutely. Now I know we're almost at the end here. We've both got to go. But just talking about the idea that we mentioned it earlier on, that we're constantly healing, and I never really liked the idea of that, because can't we just get it done, right? But when I think about it, we all share common issues. We're going to grieve for the loss of someone at some point. That is going to be a healing that we're going to have to go through. So there are commonalities in life where, yes, healing does go on for a long time.
Yes, it does. I've had so many clients, Kevin, say, when do we get there? When do we arrive? And the truth is, as long as we're breathing, we are going to be on this journey of growing and healing and evolving. And I think when we accept that that's just part of the package, then we can also let go of this notion that life has to be about suffering. Life isn't about suffering. It contains some suffering in it. And when we can befriend that, then I think that we can transcend it.
Yes, and just before you go, the most important message again, just to reiterate to us in your work, would you say?
I would say the most important message, it's kind of twofold. It's number one, please start cultivating that relationship with yourself because the healing of this world really does start with you. Each one of us being individually responsible for looking within ourselves and finding the places that need some light shined on them, doing our work, helping ourselves to heal, then we really do become that healing force that we can help others to heal. And that also that this is such a worthy journey and that we're not in it alone. Um, that we really can, no matter what we've been through, what our circumstances are, that we really do have the gift of love and light within us. And so let's do the work to excavate whatever we need to so we can really let those sparks and that light shine through. And I think through that, we're really going to light up this world.
Well, I just want to say, Stephanie James, just thank you for what you're doing as well. It's very important, and I know that you'll continue to grow, and in so many ways with the work that you're doing, especially with the documentary coming out. That is fantastic, and congratulations when it does. Again, we'll link it down in the description in the future when it does come out, so people watching this back and can find that link. So I just want to say thank you so much for your time today. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. This has just been such a pleasure and such a delight being with you. Thank you so much.